I'm Vivian. Sitting here in my small apartment, looking out at the fading sunset, I can't help but reflect on the storm that has recently passed through my life. It all started with a simple trip to the grocery store, a routine errand that would shatter my sense of security and trust. I remember standing in that bargain grocery store, the harsh fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The conveyor belt was lined with the basics I needed: canned beans, generic cereal, and my blood pressure medication. I was just trying to pay for these simple items, nothing fancy. But when I slid my debit card into the reader, the screen flashed red. Declined. A strange heat crawled up my neck. I tried again, telling myself it had to be a glitch. The machine beeped, louder this time, as if it wanted to broadcast my humiliation to everyone in line. The cashier avoided my eyes, and a man behind me sighed impatiently, making me feel even smaller. I whispered that I might need to put some things back. My hands trembled as I pushed aside the very items I needed most. I couldn't understand. I'd been so careful with my money since retiring. There was no reason my card shouldn't work. I walked out of the store with a plastic bag that held only half of what I needed, and a shame that clung to me like a shadow. The cold air hit me hard, but not as hard as the thought that something was deeply, frighteningly wrong. When I got home, I opened my laptop and typed in the login information I'd used for years. The screen blinked, and then a message appeared that I'd never seen before: access denied. Credentials invalid. My heart dropped. I tried again and again, but nothing worked. Then, a text buzzed on my phone. It was from my son, Ethan. His message was short and casual: Mom, I changed the settings. From now on, I'll handle the account. It's safer this way. Safer for who? A suspicion I didn't want to believe began to grow. I sat at the kitchen table, the quiet in my apartment weighing heavily on me. I kept trying my bank login, typing slower each time, as if being gentle with the keys might change the outcome. But the screen kept throwing the same cold message at me. I picked up my phone and called Ethan. It rang twice before going to voicemail. His recorded voice, cheerful from years ago, played in my ear. Leave a message, I'll call you back. I hung up without speaking. I tried again 15 minutes later, with the same result. I walked to the refrigerator and opened it, staring at the barren shelves. There was a carton of eggs, a half-empty jar of peanut butter, and a wrinkled apple I'd been meaning to throw out. I'd been stretching my meals to make my pension last, thinking I was managing well. Clearly, I was wrong. My mind drifted back to last summer, when Ethan first suggested merging our accounts. He told me that scams targeting the elderly were getting worse, and he didn't want me to fall for something stupid. I'd laughed it off at the time, teasing him that I was old, not helpless. But he'd been insistent, almost tense. He'd walked me into the bank, guiding me through signatures and authorizations with a hand on my back. I'd felt oddly grateful, as it had been so long since he'd shown that kind of attention. Now, I wondered if that had been the first step in a scheme I didn't want to see clearly. My phone buzzed again. A text from Ethan: busy. I'll call later. No explanation, no reassurance, not even a question about why I'd called twice. I stared at the message, waiting for anger to rise, but instead, I felt a slow, sinking disappointment. A light knock sounded on my door. I startled, wiping at my eyes before opening it. It was my neighbor, Rose. She was wrapped in a warm shawl, holding a basket of fresh bread. I baked too much, she said, but the look in her eyes told me she knew something was off. I stepped aside to let her in. She set the basket on the counter and turned to face me with a calm presence I'd always admired. She didn't push or pry, just waited. And I fell apart. I told her about the grocery store, the declined card, the login failure, and Ethan's text. With every detail, Rose's expression tightened with concern. Vivian, she said softly, this isn't normal. I shook my head. He's my son. He wouldn't just take things away from me. Maybe he doesn't think that's what he's doing, she said gently. But that doesn't make this right. Her words struck deep. I'd been so busy trying to make sense of Ethan's behavior that I hadn't allowed myself to call it what it was, fear disguised as confusion, hurt disguised as excuses. Rose reached into her purse and pulled out 2 folded $20 bills. She set them on the table. Take this. Just for now. It's a loan. Pay me back whenever. I'm not letting you go without food. My throat tightened. I picked up the bills slowly. Thank you, I said, my voice barely audible. She rested a hand on my shoulder. There are places that can help, you know? The community center has a pantry, and there's a flyer about a legal clinic for seniors on the notice board. Just keep it in mind. After she left, I sat alone, her words echoing in the quiet. A legal clinic, a pantry. Resources for those with no other options. Was that who I'd become? I didn't want to believe it, but the truth was undeniable. I had no access to my own money, a nearly empty refrigerator, and my son, the person I trusted most, hadn't even asked if I was okay. The next morning, I woke with a heaviness in my chest. I hadn't slept much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that grocery store scanner flashing red or Ethan's message. I walked to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator again, hoping against hope that something might have changed. But it was still the same. I couldn't avoid the pharmacy much longer. My blood pressure medication was running low, and I'd been spacing out my doses to make the bottle last. I knew my doctor would be furious if she knew, but without access to my account, I couldn't risk overdrawing whatever Ethan was doing with the money. I didn't even know if the balance was positive or negative. Around mid-morning, there was a soft knock at my door. When I opened it, it was my 9-year-old granddaughter, Lily. She had her backpack slung over one shoulder, and her hat was askew. Grandma, Daddy forgot my lunch at home. Can I have a snack? Her voice was light and innocent, unaware of the storm inside me. I let her in quickly, not wanting her mother, Sarah, who was waiting in the car outside, to see the state of my fridge. Lily took off her backpack and wandered toward the kitchen. She stopped when she saw how bare everything was. Are you out of food? She asked. My throat tightened. Just need to go shopping, sweetheart. I'll be fine. She nodded, but her small shoulders tensed. She reached for the wrinkled apple and held it as if it were precious. I'll eat this. It's okay. The sight cut through me. I walked over, gently took the apple from her hand, and kissed the top of her head. No, honey. I'll pack something for you. I found a box of old crackers in the back of a drawer, wrapped them carefully, and tucked them into her backpack. She hugged me before leaving. I miss you, she whispered. I miss you, too, I said, my voice catching. Call me anytime. As she ran back to the car, I stood at the doorway watching Sarah glance up at my window before driving away. Her expression was unreadable, but her lips were pressed tight. Whether she suspected something or simply didn't want to be involved, I couldn't tell, but it left me with a hollow feeling. When I walked back inside, the quiet felt suffocating. I wandered to the living room and sat on the edge of the sofa. My mind drifted back to a time when I'd been sick with pneumonia. Ethan had said he'd stop by after work, but he never came. Rose had been the one to find me, pale and shivering, and called the doctor. She'd stayed until I could keep down a bowl of soup. I'd always made excuses for Ethan, telling myself he was overwhelmed with work. But the truth was becoming harder to deny. Somewhere along the way, he'd stopped seeing me as a person who raised him and started seeing me as a responsibility he could manage or ignore. Around noon, Rose knocked again, this time with a thermos of soup. Leftovers, she said, though it was clearly freshly made. I invited her in, and we sat at the table while the steam warmed my face. She watched me carefully. How bad is it, Vivian? I stared down at the spoon in my hand. I don't know anymore. I can't see the account. I can't buy my medication, and Ethan, he's not talking to me. Rose's jaw tightened. This isn't just miscommunication. You need help, real help. I hesitated. I don't want to drag anyone into family issues. This stopped being a family issue when you couldn't buy groceries, she said. There are resources, people who know what to do. I looked up at her, and for the first time, I didn't push her words away. What kind of resources? She reached into her jacket and unfolded a small flyer. It was from the community board, a free financial safety workshop for seniors hosted by Ryan Carter. The name hit me with a shock of recognition. Ryan. I hadn't thought about him in years. I whispered his name aloud, and the memory of a young boy I'd helped in a park came flooding back. He'd been sitting alone on a bench, looking cold and hungry. I'd bought him a sandwich and a hot drink and sat with him for a while, talking. I'd forgotten that memory for years, tucking it away with other small acts of kindness. But now, seeing his name here tied to a workshop about financial safety for seniors felt like more than a coincidence. The workshop was that afternoon in the community hall. I wasn't sure I had the energy to attend, but the alternative was sitting alone in my apartment waiting for Ethan to remember I existed. So, I put on my warmest coat, tucked the flyer into my purse, and walked slowly toward the community hall. The hall was modest, with long tables and a chalkboard on the wall. There were about a dozen older adults clustered in small groups, chatting about rising costs and healthcare. I hovered near the doorway until I heard a familiar warm voice call out from the front. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ryan Carter. Thank you for being here. I froze. The young boy I remembered had grown into a confident, well-dressed man. His eyes, though, were still the same kind and gentle eyes. He began speaking about common scams, red flags to watch for, and the importance of keeping financial independence. His voice carried a mixture of authority and empathy that I couldn't stop listening to. When the workshop ended, people gathered around him with questions. I waited off to the side, unsure if I should approach him, unsure if he would even remember me. When there was finally a quiet moment, I stepped forward. Ryan? My voice trembled. He turned, polite and professional at first, but as he looked at me more closely, something shifted in his expression. Recognition dawned slowly. MS. Vivian. Is it really you? I nodded, suddenly emotional. Ryan pulled me into a gentle hug. I can't believe this. You're the reason I got back on my feet. You helped me when no one else would. I only did what anyone should, I whispered. Not everyone does, he said with quiet conviction. When we sat down at one of the tables, I told him what had happened, how my card was declined, how Ethan locked me out of the joint account, and how I didn't even know the balance anymore. Each sentence felt like peeling back a layer I'd kept hidden, and it stung to expose it. Ryan listened without interruption, his posture gradually tightening, his jaw clenching in a way that betrayed his concern. Vivian, he said slowly, this isn't a misunderstanding. This is control, and it's hurting you. I looked down at my hands. He's my son. I don't want to believe he'd do something intentionally cruel. People don't have to mean harm to cause it, Ryan replied. But you deserve to feel safe, and you deserve access to your own money. A lump formed in my throat. I don't even know where to start. You start, he said gently, by letting someone help you this time. He asked me if I had any recent bank statements. I explained that everything had been online since Ethan combined our finances. Ryan tapped his fingers thoughtfully. There's a lawyer I trust, someone who specializes in elder financial cases. She'll know what to do, and I'll go with you, if you want. You shouldn't face this alone. The idea of involving an attorney stirred a mix of relief and fear. Taking legal action against my own son felt unthinkable. But doing nothing felt even worse. I nodded slowly. Yes. I think I need help. Ryan smiled, the same gentle smile I remembered from so many years ago. Then that's what we'll do. He walked me to the parking lot. As he reached his car, he turned back one more time. There's a way through this, Vivian. It's not easy, but it starts with facing the truth. I hugged my coat closer. I'm scared. Courage doesn't mean you aren't, he said. It just means you keep going anyway. As he drove away, I stood beneath the fading afternoon light, the flyer still in my purse. For the first time since that humiliating moment in the grocery store, I felt a flicker of hope. 2 days later, Ryan drove me to attorney Ava Thompson's office. The waiting room smelled of coffee and fresh paper. I sat with my hands folded tightly in my lap, listening to the ticking of a clock on the wall. When Ava greeted us, her handshake was firm and her expression was calm. She guided us into her office and listened as I explained everything: my lost access to the account, the declined card, and the rising fear. She asked careful questions, taking notes with a pen. When she finished reviewing what little documentation I had, she leaned back in her chair. Vivian, what you're describing fits the criteria for financial exploitation. You have a legal right to access your funds, and you have the right to separate your finances from your son's control. The words hit me with a mixture of grief and relief. I nodded, wiping at my eyes. What do I have to do? We start by gathering proof, Ava said. Then we file for a financial protection order. It doesn't accuse him of a crime. It simply restores control to you. I expected fear to rise, but instead, I felt a quiet surge of strength. I wasn't attacking my son. I was reclaiming myself. Within a week, Ava obtained the statements Ethan had been managing. Seeing them was like uncovering a secret I already knew but hadn't wanted to face. There were charges for expensive restaurants I'd never visited, luxury items I'd never bought, and large withdrawals with no explanation. I stared at the pages, each line tightening something in my chest. Did he think I wouldn't notice? Or did he just think I couldn't do anything about it? I whispered. Ava placed a comforting hand on my forearm. This isn't about punishing him. It's about restoring what is yours. The hearing at the county courthouse came faster than I expected. The room was small, and the judge was stern but patient. Ethan sat across from me, avoiding my eyes. Sarah kept her gaze on her hands. When Ethan spoke, he insisted he'd done everything to protect me, that I was getting older and making emotional decisions. His words cut more deeply than I imagined they could. When it was my turn, my voice trembled at first, but steadied as I described the day at the grocery store, the shame, the confusion, and the emptiness in my fridge. I told the judge how it felt to be treated like a child who couldn't be trusted with her own life. The judge took a long moment before speaking. Mr. Ethan, whatever your intentions, you left your mother without access to basic necessities. That is unacceptable. I strongly advise you to resolve this cooperatively. Outside the courtroom, Ethan finally met my eyes. For the first time in years, I saw uncertainty instead of confidence. Mom, I didn't think it would get this far. That was the problem, I said quietly. You didn't think of me at all. He agreed to return the funds he'd spent and remove his name from every account tied to mine. The paperwork was signed that afternoon. Weeks passed. My new account received my benefits directly. My fridge filled again. I began taking evening walks, letting the cold air remind me that I was still here, still capable. Lily visited often, her laughter filling my small apartment. Ethan kept his distance at first, but his apologies were sincere. Forgiveness would take time, but I wasn't rushing myself. One evening, as I watched the sunset from my window, I realized something simple and quiet. I felt safe again. And that, after everything, was enough.